Welcome, everyone. Today, we're going on an incredible journey, one of the most exciting and unbelievable events in human history. Imagine a moment when the entire world held its breath. It was July 20th, 1969, the day humans first walked on the moon. Can you believe it? At that time, 650 million people watched the event live on television. Picture it. Families gathered around tiny black and white TV screens, eyes wide with wonder. Some were excited, some were nervous. Could this really be happening? A human being stepping onto the moon? And then, it happened. Neil Armstrong, an American astronaut, took that historic step. His words still echo through time. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Goosebumps, right? But was it really that simple? Or was there a deeper, more dangerous story behind this moment? Even today, people still ask questions. Was the moon landing real, or was it all staged in a secret studio? Why did the American flag seem to move when there's no wind on the moon? What about the strange shadows in the photos? Well, today, we're not just going to repeat what's in history books. We're going to uncover the full story, the risks, the sacrifices, the untold mysteries. And while we do, you'll be improving your English listening skills. Sounds like an adventure? Let's get started. The Space Race, a battle for glory. Before we talk about Apollo 11, let's ask an important question. Why did America even want to go to the moon? Was it for science, or was it for something else? The answer lies in something called the space race. It wasn't just about space. It was about power, pride, and proving who was the best. The two most powerful countries at the time, the United States, USA, and the Soviet Union, USSR, now Russia, were competing for dominance. And this rivalry wasn't just friendly competition. It was about proving who was superior in technology, intelligence, and influence. Let's go back a little. In 1957, the Soviet Union shocked the world. They launched Sputnik 1, the first ever satellite. Imagine being an American at that time. One morning you wake up, read the newspaper, and see that the USSR has sent something into space. Fear, shock, embarrassment. The United States was supposed to be the most advanced country, but now they were losing to their biggest rival. Then, in 1961, the Soviets did something even bigger. They sent a man into space, Yuri Gagarin. He became the first human to orbit the Earth. Can you imagine how Americans felt? People were asking, is the Soviet Union better than us? Are we falling behind? The pressure was real. The USA needed to prove itself, and that's when President John F. Kennedy made a bold promise. We choose to go to the moon. In 1961, President Kennedy stood before a massive crowd and made an announcement that changed history. He said, "We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard." Think about that. He promised something no one had ever done before. He said the USA would send a man to the moon and bring him back safely before the decade ended. But how? There were no smartphones, no internet, no GPS. Computers were basic, less powerful than the phone you're using right now. Yet Kennedy promised something impossible. NASA, the American Space Agency, immediately got to work. They created the Apollo program, named after Apollo, the Greek god of the sun. But here's something shocking. At first, everything kept failing. Failure, fire, and tragedy. Between 1961 and 1966, NASA tested rockets. Most of them failed. Some exploded. Some never even took off. Then came Apollo 1. This mission wasn't even supposed to launch. It was just a test. 3 astronauts, Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee, were inside the spacecraft, preparing for a future flight. Everything seemed fine. Then, disaster struck. A fire broke out inside the spacecraft. The astronauts were trapped. Within seconds, the flames spread. They couldn't escape. All 3 died. The world was devastated. People started asking, is going to the moon too dangerous? Should we even try? NASA had 2 choices, give up or push forward. They chose to push forward. They improved the spacecraft. They fixed mistakes. They kept going. Apollo 11, a mission that couldn't fail. After years of testing, NASA was finally ready. Apollo 11 was the mission that had to succeed. If it failed, it would be a disaster. If it succeeded, it would change the world forever. Get ready, because in the next part, we'll uncover the biggest moon landing conspiracies. Are they true or just myths? Hey there, curious minds. Have you ever dreamed of flying to the moon? Imagine leaving Earth, floating in space, and stepping onto a world no human has ever touched before. Sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, right? But in 1969, it became real. 3 brave astronauts, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins, embarked on a mission that would change history forever. This wasn't just any mission. It was the mission. The first time humans would set foot on the moon. But before they could take that legendary step, they had to train for years. Think about it. Walking on Earth is easy because of gravity, but what about walking on the moon, where gravity is much weaker? They had to practice moving in low gravity, wearing heavy spacesuits, and even learning how to eat and drink in space. And let's be honest, this mission was dangerous. If something went wrong, they might never come back. Can you imagine leaving your family, knowing you might never see them again? Yet these astronauts were ready to push the limits of human exploration. The rocket that could lift a city. To get to the moon, they needed a rocket powerful enough to break free from Earth's gravity. Enter Saturn V. The biggest, most powerful rocket ever built. Picture a 36-story building. That's how tall it was. Now imagine 400 elephants standing together. That's how much it weighed. And when it launched, it created 7.6 million pounds of thrust. That's strong enough to lift a small city into the sky. And where did all of this happen? Cape Kennedy, Florida, USA. The moment the world held its breath. It was July 16, 1969. Early in the morning, thousands of people gathered near the launch site. Millions more sat glued to their TV screens, holding their breath. This was history in the making. At 9:32 a.m., the countdown began. 10. The astronauts sat strapped inside, hearts racing. 9, 8, 7. The rocket engines roared, shaking the ground like an earthquake. 6, 5, 4. Flames and smoke erupted. 3, 2, 1. Liftoff. With a deafening explosion, the Saturn V tore through the sky. Flames blazed beneath it, smoke covered the launch pad, and within seconds, it was soaring high above Earth. Can you picture it? 3 humans, sitting in a tiny spacecraft, leaving behind everything they knew. Inside, the force was unbearable. The astronauts were pushed back into their seats, feeling a pressure nearly 4 times their body weight. Then, suddenly, weightlessness. They had reached space. 3 days in the endless darkness. Their journey wasn't quick. They had to travel 384,000 kilometers to reach the moon. That's like circling 6, 5, 4. The ground trembled. People covered their ears as the engines roared like thunder. 3, 2, 1. Liftoff. With an explosion of fire and smoke, Saturn V's lifted off the ground. The force was so intense that even people miles away felt the vibration in their chests. The rocket climbed higher and higher, leaving behind a fiery trail in the sky. Inside the spacecraft, the astronauts felt a powerful force pushing them back into their seats. Their bodies were pressed against their harnesses. They had trained for this moment, but nothing could truly prepare them for the feeling of being launched into space. In just 12 minutes, they reached space. The shaking stopped. Suddenly, there was silence. Floating in space. For the first time, they were weightless. Their bodies floated inside the spacecraft. Have you ever seen astronauts in space? They don't walk. They float. The same thing happened to Neil, Buzz, and Michael. They unstrapped themselves and drifted around, adjusting to their new reality. Outside their window, Earth grew smaller and smaller, a beautiful blue and white ball hanging in the darkness of space. Can you imagine leaving your home planet behind, knowing you might never return? But there was no time for emotions. They had a job to do. Their next destination? The moon. The longest 3 days. Reaching the moon wasn't instant. The journey took 3 days. 3 days inside a small spacecraft, floating, eating freeze-dried food, and sleeping in tiny bags attached to the walls. There was no gravity, so they had to drink liquids from tubes and use a tiny suction-powered bathroom. At night, they gazed out the window into endless darkness. No air, no sound, just the silent, black void of space. And then, after 3 long days, they arrived. The most dangerous part, landing on the moon. Now came the scariest part, landing. The astronauts had a special spacecraft called the lunar module, or Eagle. It looked like a giant insect with 4 thin legs. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin climbed inside while Michael Collins stayed in the main spacecraft, orbiting the moon alone. Imagine that, alone in space, circling the moon while your teammates go down, hoping they'll return. No backup, no rescue mission, just faith that everything would work. As Eagle descended, the moon's gray, dusty surface came into view. The astronauts were nervous. One mistake, and they'd crash. Then, suddenly, a problem. A heart-stopping error. The computer started flashing error messages. Something was wrong. Buzz Aldrin quickly checked the system. The computer was overloaded. Should they cancel the landing? Abort the mission? If they stopped now, the dream of walking on the moon would be over. Back on Earth, NASA's mission control in Houston had to decide. Fast. After a few tense moments, the decision came. Ignore the error. Continue landing. Neil Armstrong took manual control. He steered Eagle carefully, looking for a safe place to land. But there was another problem. The planned landing site was covered in huge rocks. Landing there could be deadly. He had to find a new spot, quickly. Seconds from disaster. Fuel was running low. 20 seconds left. If they didn't land soon, they'd run out of fuel and crash. 10 seconds left. Neil spotted a clear area. He guided Eagle toward it, controlling everything by hand. 5 seconds. Then, contact light. They had landed. At 4:17 p.m. USA time, Neil Armstrong's voice crackled over the radio. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. The world explodes with joy. On Earth, people cheered. Some cried. Others hugged strangers in the streets. The impossible had just become possible. But the mission wasn't over. The biggest moment was still to come. The first step on the moon. Neil and Buzz prepared to exit the spacecraft. Their hearts pounded. Their hands trembled. They were about to do something no human had ever done before. Neil carefully climbed down the ladder. The whole world was watching. He reached the last step. Beneath him, the dusty moon's surface stretched out in every direction. He took a deep breath, and then his foot touched the ground. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. The world held its breath. History had just been made. But what happened next? Did everything go smoothly? Or was there another problem waiting for them on the moon? Have you ever dreamed of walking on the moon? Imagine standing on a world where the sky is always black, where there's no wind, no sound, just an endless, silent desert of dust and rock. Sounds unreal, right? But for Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, this wasn't a dream. It was real. It was history in the making. The world was watching. Every TV screen, every radio, every heart was focused on one moment. The moment that would change everything. Two humans about to step onto the moon. But wait. Before they could take that giant leap, they had work to do. Inside the cramped lunar module, Armstrong and Aldrin were busy checking every system. Was the spacecraft stable? Was there enough oxygen? One small mistake could mean disaster. There was no second chance. NASA had planned for them to rest before stepping outside, but come on, who could sleep at a time like this? Can you imagine? You're the first human to set foot on another world, and someone tells you, hey, take a nap first. No way. Armstrong and Aldrin couldn't wait. With permission from Mission Control, they decided to go out early. But first, they had to suit up. And these weren't just any suits. These were life-saving, space-proof, state-of-the-art pieces of engineering. Each suit weighed about 82 kilograms, 180 lb, on Earth. But thanks to the moon's weak gravity, it felt like only 14 kilos, 30 lb. That didn't mean it was comfortable. The suits had thick gloves, sturdy boots, and a gold-covered visor to protect their eyes from the sun's harsh rays. Every single piece had to be perfect. A tiny tear, a small crack, that would mean instant death, because there was no air, no pressure, nothing to save them. Finally, they were ready. Armstrong moved toward the hatch. His heartbeat raced. This was it. He pressed a few buttons, and with a soft hissing sound, the door opened. And there it was, the moon, silent, endless, waiting. Slowly, Armstrong climbed down the ladder. Every move had to be careful. One wrong step, and he could fall. And remember, falling here wasn't like falling on Earth. The moon's gravity was 6 times weaker, which made walking feel strange, almost like floating. The dust beneath him looked soft, but who knew what lay beneath? He had to be cautious. And then, at exactly 10:56 p.m. USA time on July 20th, 1969, Armstrong did it. He placed one foot on the moon's surface, and then he spoke the words that would be remembered forever. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Millions of people held their breath. Some cried, some cheered. Around the world, televisions showed history unfolding. This was not science fiction. This was real. Humanity had left Earth for the first time. A few minutes later, Buzz Aldrin followed. He climbed down, looked around, and said something just as powerful. Magnificent desolation. Magnificent, because the view was breathtaking. The Earth, small and glowing in the sky, looked fragile and beautiful. Desolation, because the moon was empty. No water, no air, no life, just silence. Imagine being there, looking up at Earth, knowing that home is 384,400 kilometers away. A tiny blue ball in an infinite black sky. But there was no time to stand and stare, and they had work to do. First, they had to plant the American flag. Sounds simple, right? Just stick it in the ground. But there was a problem. The moon's surface was harder than expected. It wasn't soft like beach sand. It was tough, almost like rock. They struggled, pushing the flagpole in, and when they let go, the flag seemed to move. This is where conspiracy theories started. People thought, wait, why is the flag waving? There's no wind on the moon. But the truth? The movement came from the astronauts themselves. When they twisted the pole into the ground, it wobbled. And since there was no air to slow it down, it kept moving for a while. A simple physics trick, nothing mysterious. Then, something incredible happened. A call came from Earth, but not just any call. It was from President Richard Nixon. Imagine that, getting a phone call while standing on the moon. Nixon's words were powerful. Because of what you have done, the heavens have become a part of man's world. It was the first long-distance call between Earth and the moon, and it made history. Before they left, Armstrong and Aldrin had another mission, collecting moon rocks. They gathered 21.5 kilo, 47 lb, of rocks and soil, samples that scientists would study for years. Every rock, every piece of dust was a clue to the moon's secrets. They also set up experiments. How hot did the moon get? Was there radiation from the sun? Could there be moonquakes? NASA wanted answers. But here's something you might not know. NASA wasn't 100% sure they could bring Armstrong and Aldrin back. There was a real chance they might get stuck on the moon. In fact, President Nixon had two speeches prepared, one for success and one for failure. If the astronauts had been stranded, he would have told the world that they died as heroes. Can you imagine the pressure they were under? Finally, after 2 hours and 31 minutes on the surface, it was time to leave. The greatest mission in human history was almost complete. But there was one final challenge: getting back safely. Would the lunar module lift off as planned? Would they survive re-entry to Earth's atmosphere? Or would this incredible journey end in tragedy? Imagine this. You've just achieved the impossible. You've set foot on a place no human has ever been before. You've looked down at Earth from a land of dust and silence. You've left behind your footprints on a world millions of miles away. But now, it's time to go home. And there's a problem. A big problem. If their lunar module failed to take off, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin would be trapped on the moon forever. No second chances, no rescue missions, just silence. Imagine standing there, staring at the black sky, knowing you might never see home again. Can you feel that fear, that uncertainty? Even President Nixon had prepared for the worst. He had a speech ready in case they didn't make it back. Let that sink in for a moment. The whole world was watching, holding its breath. Would they return as heroes, or become names on a tragic memorial? The final moments on the moon. Before leaving, the astronauts made some tough choices. They needed to make the lunar module as light as possible. So, they left behind a few things. The American flag standing proudly on the lunar surface. A plaque that read, "We came in peace for all mankind." Their lunar boots. Yes, they literally left their shoes on the moon. A small golden olive branch, a symbol of peace. Then, they climbed back into the Eagle lunar module. The hatch closed. They prepared for liftoff. Imagine sitting inside that tiny, fragile spacecraft, knowing that if one part failed, it was over. At 1:54 p.m., USA time, on July 21st, 1969, the moment of truth arrived. The engine ignited. The top half of the module blasted upward, leaving the bottom half behind. Buzz Aldrin later described the feeling as getting kicked in the back by a giant. Can you picture it? A force so powerful that it pushed them up and away from the moon? As they ascended, they caught a final glimpse of their flag. It moved slightly, shaken by the force of their departure. For years, people believed it was still standing there, untouched. But in 2012, NASA confirmed the truth. The powerful blast had knocked it over. A new challenge in space. Now, Armstrong and Aldrin were floating toward Columbia, the command module where their third crew member, Michael Collins, was waiting. But there was another problem. The docking mechanism wasn't working properly. They had to connect their spacecraft to Columbia. If they failed, they would run out of oxygen and die in space. Can you imagine the pressure? Every second counted. Armstrong, known for his calm under pressure, adjusted the controls. The world held its breath. And then, click, the docking was successful. They were finally together again. inside Columbia. They closed the hatch and let the Eagle go, leaving it behind to crash onto the moon. The most dangerous part of the mission. After 2 more days of travel, Earth was in sight. But one final challenge remained: the re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. Here's why it was terrifying. They were moving at 40,000 kilometers per h, $25,000 Mach. That's faster than a bullet. If they entered at the wrong angle, they would either burn up or bounce off into space, lost forever. The only thing protecting them? A special heat shield at the bottom of their spacecraft. As they hit the atmosphere, the temperature outside the capsule soared to 2,760 degrees, 5,000 degrees, hotter than molten lava. The spacecraft glowed like a fireball. Inside, the astronauts couldn't see anything, just shaking, heat, and silence from mission control. For 3 minutes, communication was lost. 3 minutes felt like an eternity. Then, a crackling sound. "Columbia, this is Houston. Do you copy?" And then, their voices came through. They had survived. At 12:50 p.m. on July 24, 1969, Apollo 11 splashed down into the Pacific Ocean. The mission was over, or so they thought. The final twist: moon germs. NASA had one last surprise waiting. What if the astronauts had brought back moon germs? What if these mysterious microbes caused a deadly disease? Sounds like a sci-fi movie, right? But NASA wasn't taking any chances. The moment Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins were pulled out of the ocean, they were put into quarantine for 21 days. They were locked inside a small metal room called the Mobile Quarantine Facility, MQF. Even President Nixon had to talk to them through glass. 3 weeks later, doctors confirmed they were completely healthy. A hero's welcome. On August 13, 1969, they were finally free. And the celebrations? Unbelievable. New York City, over 4 million people lined the streets to cheer for them. World tour. They visited 24 countries in 45 days, meeting kings, queens, presidents, and millions of fans. They were global heroes. But what happened after? Neil Armstrong chose a quiet life, becoming a professor. Buzz Aldrin became a strong advocate for space exploration. Michael Collins worked behind the scenes, helping plan future space missions. Even today, some people question the moon landing. Was it fake? A Hollywood trick? But the evidence is clear. Thousands of people worked on Apollo 11. Keeping a secret that big is impossible. Moon rocks brought back are different from Earth rocks. In 2009, NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter took photos of the Apollo 11 landing site, showing the remains of the Eagle and even the astronauts' footprints. Apollo 11 was real, and it remains one of the greatest achievements in human history. Was it worth it? The Apollo program cost $25.4 billion in the 1960s. Today, that would be about $160 billion. Some say that money could have been used for hospitals, education, and jobs instead. But what did we gain? Hundreds of thousands of jobs in engineering, science, and research. New technology that we still use today, like GPS, satellite technology, and microchips. A new vision for humanity. Apollo 11 wasn't just about landing on the moon. It was about dreaming bigger, pushing the limits of what's possible. But here's the real question. What's next? The moon landing happened over 50 years ago. Since then, we've sent rovers to Mars, discovered thousands of exoplanets, and launched telescopes that can see the edge of the universe. But will humans ever return to the moon? Or even go to Mars? What if the next great space adventure is just around the corner? Have you ever looked at your smartphone and wondered, how did we get here? What if I told you that the tiny, powerful device in your pocket exists because of a mission to the moon over 50 years ago? Sounds unbelievable, right? But it's true. The Apollo program wasn't just about space travel. It changed our world in ways we rarely think about. Let's go back to the 1960s. Computers were the size of entire rooms, slow and expensive. But NASA needed them to be smaller, faster, and more reliable. So they pushed technology to the limits. The result? The foundation of modern computing. The same advancements that helped land humans on the moon led to the powerful processors in our laptops, tablets, and, yes, even the smartphone you're using right now. But that's just the beginning. What about medical innovations? Have you ever had an MRI scan or seen someone with a prosthetic limb? Those life-saving technologies exist because of NASA's research. They developed better heart monitors, medical scanners, and even artificial limbs. Think about that for a second. Because of space exploration, millions of lives have been saved or improved. Isn't that incredible? And here's a fun fact. NASA didn't just help medicine. It also changed the way we use tools. Ever used a cordless vacuum cleaner or a power drill? That's right. NASA's work on portable, battery-powered tools for astronauts led to the technology we now use at home. Next time you clean your house with a wireless vacuum, just remember, you're using a piece of space-age technology. Now let's talk about something serious. Fire safety. The Apollo program faced a heartbreaking tragedy. In 1967, a fire during a test killed 3 astronauts. It was devastating, but NASA learned from it. They developed fireproof materials that are now used in firefighter suits, protecting those who risk their lives to save others. Space exploration didn't just take us beyond Earth, it made our world safer. But despite all these achievements, some people still believe the moon landing was fake. Have you heard the theories? They say, the flag looks like it's waving, but there's no wind on the moon. Sounds convincing, right? But here's the truth. NASA used a metal rod to hold the flag up, and when the astronauts adjusted it, it moved, just like it would in space. Then there's the classic argument. Why are there no stars in the photos? Aha! Here's the simple answer. Camera settings. Just like when you take a picture of a bright street at night, the stars disappear because of the exposure. The cameras were set to capture the bright lunar surface, making the dim stars invisible. It's photography, not a conspiracy. And what about those weird shadows? Some say they look like a Hollywood set, but let's think logically. The moon's surface reflects light differently than Earth. That's why the shadows appear unusual. If the whole thing were staged, don't you think other countries would have exposed the lie? Even the Soviet Union, America's biggest rival at the time, never questioned the moon landing. If anyone had a reason to call it fake, it was them. But here's a question. Why haven't humans gone back since 1972? If we could do it then, why not now? The answer is simple: money. Space missions are expensive. In the 1970s, the U.S. government was already spending billions on the Vietnam War. And once they had won the space race against the Soviets, their priorities shifted. NASA moved on to the Space Shuttle program and later set its sights on Mars. But now, after more than 50 years, things are changing. NASA's Artemis program is bringing humans back to the moon. This time, astronauts won't just visit for a few days. They'll stay for months, testing how humans can survive in space for long periods. And you know what's even more exciting? This is the first step towards sending people to Mars. Imagine that. One day, you might watch the first humans walking on the red planet. So why does Apollo 11 still matter? Because it proved that nothing is impossible. It inspired generations of scientists, engineers, and astronauts. It pushed humanity to dream bigger and reach further. Yes, it was expensive. Yes, it was dangerous. And yes, people still debate it. But think about this. When future generations look back, they won't talk about wars or politics. They'll remember the moment when humans first stepped onto another world. And that's why Apollo 11 will always be remembered. If you found this story inspiring, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and comment your thoughts below. And of course, subscribe to Simple Spoken English for more amazing